I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is the 500th episode.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Our mind becomes this box, and in it is us. And what we do so well is that we trap ourselves in our nice, comfortable box. So once you get outside your own box, which is your head, the growth then starts.
How do you do that? You go into your workplace, you look at the people around you, and you say, who do I admire and why? What are they doing that I'm not sure how to do, but they're doing it well, and I'd like to learn how to do that?
Yeah, I just felt it, man. I think we've all in this room experienced that, like that thing that you do that you know just feels right. Like, this feels like me. This is my future. Like, I think if we're all, aware of who we are as people and we're really in tune with the universe, when you're in a certain space, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I would do this for free.
I started recording these episodes in 2013, over 6 years ago, and I've interviewed 500 of the best peak performers in the world. I mean, the list goes on and on. Here's my rationale when I have someone on. I have questions to ask, and my philosophy is I only have an hour, or maybe in some cases 2 hours with them. I'm going to ask every question I can because I'm never going to probably spend this time with them ever again. So it's the only chance I have to learn. And so I'm going to be shameless, and I'm not afraid to ask any question. I want to learn, how did they become the best in the world at what they do? There's so many common qualities of many of these people, but one is specifically somebody always told them, you can't do this at some point. And it's only in that mysterious jungle on the other side of the words I can't that all 500 of these guests achieved amazing success. It's through that fire that they found the peak performance that led to not only their excellence in life, but even a greater sense of well-being. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I really feel, for me, this has been a blessing to have these 500 conversations and to share them with everybody listening. And not only that, to hear your feedback and your questions. Often I would mention on Twitter someone who was coming up as a guest, and people would respond with, ask them this, ask them this. And I would ask those questions, and they were also questions and answers that ended up changing my life, and I hope having an effect on yours. And I always ask myself, this is a lot of work. Like, I don't make any money on this. There's ads, but there's also, this is a difficult podcast. There's a lot of expenses. There's a lot of people working on this podcast. I could tell you, if anything, I lose money on this podcast because I will travel to meet a great guest, and I'll do that above and beyond whatever the advertiser's paying. And it's a lot of work. For each guest, on average, is about 8 or 9 hours of preparation. And I say on average because some are more, some could be 20 hours of preparation, and some are a little bit less. But in general, for each guest, I'll read all of their books. I'll watch all the interviews they've done. If they're an actor, I'll watch, most of their movies or TV shows. I want to be able to connect all the dots. I want to see the growth in their career and understand why they made the different decisions that led to now. And the deeper question is, what are you trying today that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone, that's a little bit difficult for you, but you get practice at being disappointed and turning disappointment into saying, well, what did I learn from this? I don't know. I could go on and on about each guest, but why do I continue to do it is I'm still continuing to learn so much. We have so many great guests lined up that I'm so proud of, and I can't wait to talk to them. We probably ask 30 people a day to come on this podcast. And it's interesting, my podcast producer, Steve Cohen, he has this philosophy, which I call the 16 touches philosophy, which is basically in order to get a great, great guest, you have to reach out to them on average 16 times without being annoying. And then eventually, he's always very confident, they'll say yes. But again, been a valuable experience. I'm a very introverted person. I'm not very good at networking. And yet I've had to reach out to people ranging from my childhood heroes to the latest authors publishing amazing books. But now I just want to mention, I hope you guys also are getting something from each podcast. If there's more you would like to learn, or if there are topics you're interested in, or if there's areas you think I should explore more, please leave a comment on the reviews. I always check out the reviews on the Apple Podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really helps me out a lot. And ask any questions or leave any review, and I'll read them and hopefully even respond to them. So to celebrate these 500 episodes and how meaningful this has been, not just as a career thing, but this podcast has been life-changing for me. It's certainly more than 10% of my life in terms of the hours. It's probably I've spent more hours working on this podcast than any other endeavor in my life, except for maybe writing. So to celebrate 500 episodes, I took clips from all the different episodes, just from the last 100 interviews, and I'm doing this every 100 episodes. Here's what you'll get from this episode. You're going to hear about developing a mindset that actually pushes you to do what you want in life. So much is about mindset and how I always say there's this daily practice to choosing yourself. And I found this to be true once I started this podcast for every single person I interviewed. How you deal with your physical health, how you deal with your emotional health, your creative health, and your spiritual health. Every single person I interviewed was focused on these 4 components, and that's part of developing a mindset. And so important, you're going to hear how people develop a sense of humor, because life is pretty hard. We all have tragedies in our life. We all have breakups that are, that really take us down, or people who reject us or betray us, or we get fired from a job, or we lose someone due to illness or accident. Who knows? We can't predict the changes in our lives. And developing a sense of humor about these situations, I'm not saying laugh at always in the face of tragedy, but learning to observe kind of the comedy in life, learning to observe the comedy that's folded in between these major tragedies in our life. This helps us to propel us from day to day with that sense of humor. It helps us to observe the things around us in a more 360-degree way. And you're going to see a lot of that in these last 100 episodes. You're also going to see how people have gone from the humblest of humble beginnings into millions, and in many cases, billions of dollars. I even wrote a book analyzing the habits of all of the billionaires I've interviewed. I call it Think Like a Billionaire. There's various ways to get it, but it's based on the interviews I've done in this podcast. You're going to hear from psychotherapists that I've interviewed. You're going to hear from business moguls. You're going to hear from peak performers of all types, athletes, comedians, rappers, writers, a Supreme Court judge. I mean, I'm really proud that this podcast was the only podcast, I believe, that a Supreme Court judge has been on. And also, a Beach Boy has been on this podcast, which I don't know of any other podcast that could really say that. So It was such a pleasure to talk to such a wide variety of people. And additionally to the ones I just mentioned, there's going to be so many other legends who are just living proof that it is never too late to choose yourself. And that's so important. I'm 51 years old. I'm always trying new things. I always wonder, am I too late? Boy, I really wish I had started this when I was 15 instead of 50. But I'm always reminded, and I think Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way, who was on the podcast, she even said that just the thought when I think that I'm too late or too old, that's almost like an emotional prison around my creativity. And she really inspired me. So to get started, you'll hear from one of my favorites from the past 100 episodes. This guy is incredible. His book, Can't Hurt Me, is incredible. The podcast, again, was life-changing for me. And I'll admit, not every podcast I do is extremely life-changing, but this one was. I would say, even though I did this podcast about 6 months ago, I would say I probably quote this guy to other people at least once a day. And so the guy I'm talking about, author of Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins, talks about how he rose from nothing to be, it's probably one of the most physically fit people on the planet. And it was pure, raw pain for him, not only physically, but in every aspect of his life. And so inspirational to see what he had been through and what he talked about. Among the many quotes I have quoted him from the podcast, one thing I said to someone just yesterday is that this applies physically like in exercise, but it could apply to anything. When you feel you're at your very limit, where your body is screaming, stop, the pain is just too much. David Goggins told me that means you can go 40% further. So if you did 20 push-ups as an example, and your body is just like, I can't do another one, it means you could probably do 40% or at least 8 more before you really conk out. And I find that this idea metaphorically applies to so many areas of life, but I'll let him describe to you. So this is from episode 412. I hope you enjoy it.
This table is a box shape, and we live right here. But outside this box-shaped table, how much space is in this room? A lot.
Yeah.
That's our mind. Our mind becomes this box, and in it is us. And what we do so well is that we trap ourselves in our nice, comfortable box. That, okay, I'm good at reading, writing, running, and I'm good at bench press. So this is what we do in our box. Outside the box is squats, deadlifts, mathematics, science, space travel, all this shit out here that I'm not good at it, so I'm gonna stay in my box. I did that for several years. Once you peek over the box and you look and you see, fuck, there's a whole fucking bunch of space out there that I can grow in. So once you get outside your own box, which is your head, the growth then starts. Like for me, I was a fat guy. I lived in my box. I was 300 pounds for a long period of time. My box was much smaller than this table. But the second I got the courage to go outside my box, I became the man that's in front of you right now. On the outside of your brain, there's possibilities in this, possibilities.
So, and you suggest like everybody should find, every day, people should find things to do outside of their comfort zone. So, like, what's an example of this outside, let's say, the physical realm?
Right.
Like, because, like you said, you went, it was, you had this life change where you were, working for Ecolab. You were basically, it's almost like a movie. I feel like I've seen the movie where, you're cleaning off cockroaches in restaurants.
It's a true
and
story,
you decide
yeah.
you're going to go, be like a SEAL, and you get inspired by this TV, and then you go out and do it, and first you fail, and then you totally have the arc of the hero. Like, it's the perfect hero's journey. And but getting out of your comfort zone happens in a lot of different ways. And what are some other ways you think people listening to this could potentially explore where their comfort zone is and then move outside of it?
So a lot of people get fooled once again with me about all the physical. This whole comfort zone shit started with me having a learning disability. So if you read the book, you know that I cheated all through school. had a fourth grade reading level up to my junior year. So where my being very uncomfortable happened was how I learn is very different than everybody else, than most people. Most people nowadays, you have a learning disability, oh my God, it's so bad, it's so horrible. A lot of learning disabilities mean one thing: the amount of work and self-discipline you have to put into yourself is beyond any kind of physical thing you can ever do. And I realized that at my kitchen table my junior year in high school when I wanted to go in the military, and I couldn't read I was reading on the fourth grade level. And I got exposed. My life got exposed to the world, and it was very embarrassing. My mom didn't even know I was cheating. She was working 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet. And so she got this letter from school and saying, hey, your son is flunking out of school. That's why I put my report card in there. And that's from cheating. That report card was from cheating. So, I was obviously cheating off, the wrong people. So, but basically how it happened was I realized for me to get in the military, I had to pass this watered down SAT. It's called the ASVAB. I failed it repeatedly, kept on failing it and failing it and failing it. I realized, okay, I have to learn pretty much from elementary all the way to high school in 6 months for my last time to pass this test. And it was a daunting task. We only had $15, a week we could spend towards a tutor. So I had 4 hours a month, and I had to pretty much learn all of high school in a period of 6 months on my own. So that became very difficult for me. And literally every night I would buy these spiral notebooks, and I had these manuals, mathematics, English, science, all these manuals. Basically, like 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. And I would go through and I had to literally memorize these manuals because I couldn't learn like everybody else. So I went through, I would get my spiral notebook, and I would start writing each page of the manual. And I would go back through and write like page 1. Imagine this. Imagine getting a science book, and how you learn the science book is writing 700 fucking pages down 4 times. 4 times to learn what's in this. So how I did it was, and that's for every single book. It took hours, 20, sometimes 20, and people don't believe it. A junior in high school, sometimes 20 hours during the summertime, I would spend at the table. Just repeat this shit. And I became obsessed over this process to where I could be in a test, and how I would do it was I'd be in a test, and I said, okay, shit, okay. Now I shut my eyes, and I remember that was on page 420, and that's how I would be able to put the answer down. It wasn't like I learned anything. I memorized what I wrote down. I don't remember any of that shit, but that's how I learned. And that's how that work ethic, and it's very powerful when you're willing to sit down at a table for 6 months and not move pretty much, but to sleep and eat and go back and to learn. And that's when all this began. So you talk about how can you become uncomfortable? If you have a learning disability, don't accept it. There's some people that have disabilities that you cannot fix. A lot of things can be fixed by hard work. Not everything, but a lot of things can be overcome by outworking whatever disability you have, mental or physical.
And you've done this in quite a few areas. So you just mentioned the learning disability and taking this test that was so important to you. Obviously, getting through Hell Week and all the different military training programs you went through was another way you had to push yourself beyond the comfort zone. Then running the 100 miles, running the Hurt 100 through Death Valley, running, doing the pull-ups, even, and we were just talking about this, going on a book tour. This has got to be. What's the worst part of going on a book tour for you?
Honestly, I talk about in the book, I used to stutter real bad. So trying to figure out how not to stutter, people go, like, how'd you do that? How did you stop stuttering? Because people can't do that. They go to speech therapists to do the focus of the mind. Right now, I'm with James. Every word I'm saying right now is thought out. So when I speak, as you see, I speak slowly and I'm very concentrated on what I'm doing. I do that with everything in life.
This next clip is from Scott Galloway, such a smart guy. He wrote The Algebra of Happiness. He's also written books about technology and technological companies. He just blows me away with his intelligence. A lot of people who have been on the podcast, I just feel, are above average in terms of genius. So Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, Robert Greene, who wrote *The 48 Laws of Power*, Nassim Taleb, who wrote *Fooled by Randomness*, *Anti-Fragile*, *Skin in the Game*, *The Black Swan*. Just so many people are incredibly smart. And actually, we've talked about intelligence quite a bit on this podcast. One of my regular favorite guests is Amy Morin, who wrote 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do, and Maria Konnikova, who wrote How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes. All these people are so intelligent, but they've written about intelligence and how to take shortcuts to improve your intelligence. But anyway, Scott Galloway wanted to figure out how he could be happier, and he wrote The Algebra of Happiness, which, again, was an inspirational conversation. This is from episode 474. Here's the clip.
Yeah, so for me, it comes from a place of anger. My father suffers from it, and it's just, again, you know, I was talking to, I think it was my sister, and I speak to my sister pretty much every week, and she asked me, she said, and I can answer almost any question or at least pretend to try, and she said, "Scott, why are you so pissed off all the time?" And I didn't have a good answer. If you look at, and I'm sure as you look at your life, being born in America, having access to state-funded education, having a wonderful family, having economic security, you know, liking what I do, I just have no excuse for being pissed off. So I started thinking a lot about just managing my own happiness. For me, depression are the only times I've felt real depression is when I've isolated myself from other people. And kind of when I moved to New York, I was living in San Francisco. I didn't like what I was doing. I was in e-commerce because I thought it was cool. I didn't
Right,
like...
so just to mention, you started Red Envelope, was one of the companies you started as an e-commerce company, went public in the first .com boom. By the way, our stories are parallel.
Yep.
I sold my first company to a public company in 1998. You rode that rise and fall, and then you had a similar rise and fall towards 2008, and then your
ups and
your
downs.
Financial ups and downs are very similar to mine. So
I'm rich. No, I'm not. I'm rich. No, I'm not. Anyway, so 99, I just decided I didn't like my job. I didn't like myself. I didn't like my friends. I thought my friends were basically unremarkable people who were super fortunate or mistook being blessed with being interesting.
What made you think that? Like, what stood out to you?
I thought a lot of the people I were hanging out, and again, it's a reflection on me and the friends I chose. I remember going to Davos. I got invited to Davos because in that day and age, if you were 33 and had a shaved head, you must be a fucking genius and know insight into the cosmos. And so I got invited to Davos a bunch of times. I made a bunch of friends there, and I just realized the only reason I'm friends with, a majority of my friends is because I'm trying to surround myself with quote unquote impressive people so other people will think I'm impressive. And I thought, am I really getting a lot of joy and camaraderie from these people? Are they getting it from me? And the answer was no. So I kind of freaked out, pressed the reset button, got divorced, resigned from the board of Red Envelope, moved to New York, basically left everything behind, and joined the faculty of NYU.
Part of that list?
I wanted to change my life dramatically. I literally wanted to kind of start over, and nothing really bad happened. I'm a wonderful woman, and people would say to me, "You're never going to do better." And I would say, "Well, I want to do different." And quite frankly, it was a selfish move. I think it was a function of the fact that I could do it. It pretty much always came down to me. That was kind of my first, second, and third priority was my happiness and my selfish needs. So it probably wasn't what I call a high character moment in my life. But I moved to New York, and we're talking about depression. I kind of became an island. I isolated myself, and that is, I basically only left my loft. I disengaged from friends. Obviously, wasn't married any longer. My mom had just passed away, which really took a toll on me. And then I basically only leave my loft for like food, sex, and go to the Ready Teller. And about 24 months into that, and occasionally do a little bit of kind of pretend work because I had some money, so I needed something to kind of pretend to do. And then I realized kind of 24 months into it that an instinct kicks in that if you continue to do this, you're going to die early. And there's a lot of research showing that men who live on their own die 8 to 10 years earlier than men who are engaged in a family. Women are better at this because they maintain social connections. But if you want if you're a man and you want to check out early, just kind of start hanging out alone a lot. And typically,
Well, how do they die?
well, of any number of ways, but essentially you have, and it makes sense, kind of a low resolution security camera on in your brain, trying to figure out if you're adding value. When you're on the Stairmaster or on a rowing machine and sweating, you fool the security camera into believing that you're hunting prey or building housing, and it secretes a hormone that's really good for you. When you're engaged at work or doing a crossword puzzle, you fool the security camera again into believing that you're making important decisions for your cohort or your clan, and decides for you to let you stick around. When you're sedentary and not engaged in other people's lives and challenged and physically active, basically the security camera figures out you're not adding any value and stops secreting the hormone that clears out the bad cholesterol, and you can develop any number of ailments, whether it's depression or diabetes or but yeah, you want to live a long time, you better, especially as a man, you better be engaged. And the number one source or the number one indicator of longevity was how social they were, or simply put, how many people in their life did they care for, or how many people in their life did they love? And it makes sense because if you think of what the camera really wants in terms of survival of the universe wants to prosper. When a sun dies, it comes back a bigger sun. The universe wants the next generation to be stronger, smarter, faster. And so it creates incentives around things that are good for the species. Eating food is fun. Having sex feels great. And most importantly, caring for others is the most important thing to the future or the survival of the species. So it's the most rewarding thing. I try and segment love into three things: the love you get as a kid, unconditional love; transactional love, which is the majority of the kind of types of love that you and I are engaging in at this point, where we get something in exchange. We get intimacy, economic security, sex, whatever it might be, a safe household to raise a family. But the most kind of, I would say, important type of love is when you get to a point emotionally, spiritually, financially, where you can sort of engage in what I would call complete love. And that is, you're not keeping score. You've just decided to go all in on someone else's well-being, regardless of what you get back. And at the end of the day, that is the most important single attribute, motion, notion, activity for the success of the species. And so if you can get to that point, it's also the most rewarding. And most people get to it instinctively with children, but I think really self-actualized people get to it with a lot of people in their lives. So they decide, I'm going to stop keeping score. I'm just going all in and on having an irrational passion for this person's well-being.
This next guest I already spoke about, Justice Sonia Sotomayor. I always wondered, there's these 9 individuals out of all 300 million people in the country that essentially decide. The buck stops there at the Supreme Court when deciding what laws will ultimately become law and which ones are unconstitutional. These people have such a big responsibility. And I did get that sense going to the building and speaking with her, how almost as like a sacred trust they treat that responsibility. And even their relationships with the other justices, which we discussed. And whether someone's on the left or the right is not as important as how these people communicate with each other and make decisions and keep on moving forward for the benefit of the country. And it was amazing to talk to her. So if you want to go back, hear the full episode, it's number 442. We're about to hear a clip, but I just want to mention all of this is going to be linked to in the show notes for this 500th episode.
When I was in law school, and I described this in my book, I went to a big private law firm and didn't have a good experience there. And I realized that, A, I wasn't ready for that kind of law practice yet, but B, that it really didn't interest me that much. And so my third year at Yale, I was literally in the library studying one night and had to go from the library to the women's bathroom, which at the time at Yale Law School was at the other end of a very long hallway. And as I walked towards that area, I saw a sign outside of the door that said Public Interest Panel. And it was a panel of public interest lawyers, some of them quite notable, talking about their work as alternatives to going to a big firm. And I poked my head in and I saw at the back of the room some food. And consistent with being a student then, I listened, and they were introducing the last speaker, and I thought, maybe I should just step in and listen to him, and then I can get some food, which I did. And it turned out to be my future boss, Bob Morgenthau. And he talked about the work in his office and how at 23, 24 years old, when we graduated from law school, we would have more responsibility as a lawyer in his office than we would have in any other area of law in which we would think of practicing at that stage in our careers. And that intrigued me. And so when his talk ended, we happened to be right next to each other online, and we started speaking, and he said, "Come interview with me tomorrow." And I looked at him and said, "I will." And I did. I went and interviewed with him, had a wonderful interview. He invited me to his office and thereafter offered me a job, and I took it. This wasn't in my plans. It was a spontaneous decision in the sense of that it wasn't planned. But I do think that you have to plan your life and be willing to stop at a moment and take a new opportunity when it fits within things that make sense to you.
Like, what excited you once he said, "Come interview with me"?
The idea that I would have the responsibility he talked about, that I would go into a courtroom, because I had already done one trial advocacy class and one barristers union, which is a fake trial at Yale. And I knew I was very good in those public speaking aspects. I had debated in high school. I'd done a fair amount of public speaking in my life and really enjoyed that aspect of things being quick and quick-fired and things being fast-paced. It's much suited to my personality. And I had gone to walk around the DA's office and realized this could be exciting work. And I took it. But so that moment, not planned, but understood in terms of what I was good at, that it presented an alternative that I should take.
And so what's interesting too is obviously you were very good at what you were doing. And there were probably many good people at Yale studying law. And let's say you were even the best. We don't know, but let's say you were. Part of it too is taking advantage of opportunities. You met somebody on a line and took advantage not of luck because you availed yourself of the opportunity to go to this public interest luncheon. You were standing on line with somebody. You said yes. But there's always a combination of being good and networking with good people. And I noticed throughout your career, there's always people who you can go to for advice, you can go to for networking. That seems
always
critically important.
You have to select those. You have to look for them. And you have to pay attention when you're doing them.
How do you do that?
How do you do that? You go into your workplace, you look at the people around you, and you say, who do I admire and why? What are they doing that I'm not sure how to do, but they're doing it well, and I'd like to learn how to do that? And then you go and you volunteer to work for them. And it means extra work. It means that you do what they're assigning you and everybody else is giving you. But you go and seek that person out. And even if you have to work later hours and longer hours, you do it to impress them. In short order, and it's happened throughout my career, they'll take you over. They'll want to work with you more because if you're useful and helpful to them, they're going to want to work more with you. And that's what's happened throughout my career. So in every setting I've gone to, I've looked for mentors who I think possess skills I don't, and skills I want to learn. And I seek them out to A, learn them, but B, to practice with their kind of integrity and professionalism. Because it's not something that comes to anyone innately. It's something you learn. And so you have to pick people that are valuable to you in the sense of being good people doing good work.
This next clip is from my live interview with Charlemagne the God, who had published a book called Shook One, Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me. It's episode 407. And we discussed this a little bit in the podcast. We talked about his anxiety, but anxiety plagues something like 26 million Americans, like almost 10% of the country. And there's been times in my life where I've been so anxious and so scared, I wouldn't be able to sleep. I wouldn't be able to function as a parent. And I had to really study how can I cure my own anxiety, because there's nothing good about anxiety. Anxiety will prevent you from creativity. It'll take away energy you need to start businesses or start creative projects or be a good community member or a good family member. I mean, a small amount of anxiety might be good to drive you forward. Like you say to yourself, oh, I'm anxious about getting my paycheck, so I better go to work. So that's a normal amount. But in our society, it's almost like we feel we're perpetually in the jungle being attacked by lions, and all we're doing is we're sitting still looking at a computer screen. And so that's why anxiety gets out of control often in society. So I was really grateful that Charlemagne came on the podcast. We did it actually in front of a live audience. It's episode 407. Let's roll the clip. One of your things you say in Black Privilege is, fuck your dreams. And it's because, in part, you initially wanted to be a rapper.
Yes.
You ended up in radio, which, by the way, could be, you could say you stuck with the umbrella of the same dream, which was being a voice in the culture and you know, being a communicator, an entertainer, a performer. So they're not the same, but it's in the same category.
Mm-hmm.
But how does one kind of navigate passion with failure?
Oh,
Or how have you done it?
that's a great question. I mean,
Finally, I asked a great question. Thank you.
like most brothers in the hood, man, like when the people we see who are successful that look like us, they're usually in entertainment or athletics. So that's why I wanted to be a rapper. And, you know, my mentor, Dr. Robert Evans, like, he told me, like, yo, you suck as a rapper. Like, rap is not your thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you should stick to this radio thing because you're, like, really good at that. And if you focus on radio, you could be one of the biggest radio personalities in the country. And I didn't fight him on that. And the reason I didn't fight him on that, like, I didn't even feel the need to want to prove him wrong, because I did enjoy radio. I really enjoyed radio more than I enjoyed rapping. You go in the booth in the studio and you hot and you sweating and you off beat and yo, run that back, and you done 1 2 1 2, just trying to catch the beat. Like, that shit is whack to me. It wasn't natural to me. And so it's like, when he said that to me, it just clicked, because a lot of times, you know, we it's not really our dream we're chasing. It's just something we see working for somebody else. And when you see it working for somebody else, you're like, oh, I can do that too. But it's not your dream. It's not the path that God wanted you to walk. Like, radio was my thing. And I got a tattoo on my arm. I got this when I was mad young, and it's Wolverine holding a microphone in his hand, because I thought I was going to be a rapper. And I just knew that microphone was going to change my life. But I realize now that microphone wasn't, you know, the spit bars. It was the
How did you know?
spit
How did you know
content.
radio? What, like, did you feel something different the first time you started doing a radio show?
Yeah, I just felt it, man. I think we've all in this room experienced that, like that thing that you do that you know just feels right. Like, this feels like me. This is my future. Like, I think if we're all, you know, aware of who we are as people and we're really in tune with the universe, you know, when you're in a certain space, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I would do this for free. Like, I genuinely enjoy doing it. Like, it lifts me up. It makes me feel empowered. It inspires me. Like, I don't even care about the money. I just like doing radio, and that's what it was for me. Like, it was almost like I would always get in trouble when I was in school for being a clown and being disruptive.
So someone listening to this who is trying to figure out, like, oh, I'm 40 years old. I just got fired from some weird job. I want to figure out what I love. I don't know. It's been 20 years of working the grind. I want to do now something I love. What could be the first step? Not
At
the
40?
last step, but the first step.
At 40?
Yeah.
I don't know. You should have had that figured out by 40. 40?
Don't let them down. Don't let them down. They're listening.
I'll tell you one thing. Don't rap.
They're listening in their
Nobody's
car.
going to respect a 40-year-old rapper trying to make it. Okay?
But they're listening in their car. They're on the edge of their seats. They're listening to you. What they want to reinvent. They just got fired.
That's not that easy. I got to hear more. Like, it's got to be a little bit more nuanced than that. I need to know exactly what it is you're trying to do. Because it is a lot of people at 40 that's quitting their jobs because they want to be entrepreneurs now, but it's because they have products that they want to sell, or, you know, they got T-shirts that they've made, or they've got some idea for an app that they want to push now. And all of that's great, but I got to hear more. I got to know exactly why you're quitting your job at 40 years old. Because I thoroughly believe that it's 168 hours in a week. And I believe that it's more than enough time to chase your dreams and deal with your reality. And the reality is you got bills. And the reality is you probably got kids at 40. And the reality is you probably got a significant other you need to take care of. So after you do your 40 hours or whatever it is a week at your job that's dealing with your reality, then use the rest of the time to try to, chase your dreams.
Right, because at some point in their lives, like you said, everybody in this room has had at some point that feeling, this is something I would do for free.
Yeah.
And even if they can't, they're not going to like immediately apply to be a radio host somewhere, but maybe there's little steps that they could take.
Well, I mean, the radio thing worked for me, and that's what I said earlier. I grew up in school. I got kicked out of 2 high schools, and I was a class clown, and I was disruptive. That's what any progress report, any write-up that you would see, disruptive, class clown. Now I get paid to be disruptive and a class clown on radio. So it's kind of like I took those, so-called flaws and made them my strength in a way. So I think that's what everybody needs to do. Like sit back and figure out what it is that you're good at, or what you were disruptive at the age of 13. Exactly. That might be your thing. Like you might have been the guy who was in school who just always drew all the time. Like you was just always drawing, and you was a very good drawer, and you used to get in trouble for not doing your homework because you was always drawing. Did you ever pursue art? Ever? Did you ever, think to get into animation maybe? Did you ever try to write your own comic? Did you ever do illustration for some books or anything? Like you just have to really pay attention to the things that you're good at that you may not be getting paid for, or you may even be getting in trouble for, and try to find power within that.
John Paul DeJoria is one of the most insane billionaires I've had the pleasure of interviewing. First off, this guy was homeless and living in his car. And from that beginnings, he had to use just raw salesmanship and creativity to build up to a career, to create an empire for himself. So first he created Paul Mitchell Hair Systems, and then he recently sold Patron Tequila for something like $3 billion. His story is amazing. You have to listen to it. But it's interesting. After the podcast was over, we were just randomly talking, and he was telling me story after story about UFOs, and then showing me these YouTube clips all about UFOs and other people who have scientific evidence. So eventually I'll have him on again to talk about UFOs. But it was so funny I always had this image in my mind that once someone becomes a billionaire, they join this club where they start calling each other on this secret hotline, and they get all the real secrets of the planet. But it was interesting just seeing this guy go into all of these like insane theories. And I say insane in the best possible way. I don't think he's insane, but it was a fun conversation. I like the way he thinks out of the box in his businesses, in his life, and even with UFOs. So I'm looking forward to my next chat with him, but here's the clip. Obviously you've achieved great success, and great success happens by being as rational as possible in terms of building, companies with thousands of people, motivating them, leading them, executing on products, selling all over the world. That requires, great intelligence, great rational behavior, great ability to understand emotionally the people around you and work with, people you love and trust and so on. But also what you're telling me shows you have this real and stuff we discussed before the podcast, which we'll get to by the end of the podcast. You have this amazing open mind where it seems like you take in an idea and you instantly start churning what pushing the edges on what you can do with this idea. And so it might be an idea like what's going on, what happened 10,000 years ago, or it might be an idea of how can we find oil ecologically safe, or it might be an idea, how can we provide medical service to 1 billion people in India. Yeah. So what do you think is, how do you exercise your creativity? Because I always feel it's a sort of muscle. Maybe you don't agree. Maybe you've had it from the beginning.
being on your planet, our planet, being on the planet Earth here, okay, one can
Are you an
experience...
alien?
Well, I'm as human as you are, okay? There may be some hybrid in there, but I don't know about that,
Right.
okay? Anyways, being on this planet, we get to experience everything we want, especially being in America, which is a free country. So you could go from homelessness to billionaire, you go from fat person to skinny person, you do anything you really want to do. But the thing is to leave yourself open to the universe. Every morning when I wake up, or most mornings when I wake up, I'll wake up, do what most people do. You go to the bathroom first. Then I'll usually try and go right back to bed. And for just a few minutes, it's almost like a mantra where I say to myself or out loud, if there's not too many people around, Creator of souls, thank you for this life you've given me and just show me the truth. And then for 2 minutes, I try and have a blank mind. That's hard to do because things run through our mind. So I'll be in a room and I'll look at the wall, I'll look at the TV set, I'll look at the drape, and to get back into I'm here in present time and try and clear my mind where there's nothing on my mind for 2 minutes. Not think about what I'm doing for the day and then go about my day. A lot of accidents happen in our days. The accidents that happen sometimes are a good one, like we turned right, not left. I was fired from this job. To start Paul Mitchell, I was fired from 3 jobs. 3 companies fired me, okay? One because I complained about them testing on animals. They shouldn't do it, right? But I learned something from all 3 companies. When I started Paul Mitchell, had I not been with all 3 companies, it would have been impossible to start Paul Mitchell with nothing or even millions of dollars.
Well,
I had the knowledge. It came my way. I was open to the universe, but I didn't know it at the time. But later on, it said, of course, that was brought out for me. So there's something called fate. There's something called fate.
Well, and I believe that in your case in particular, because in all of those companies, you were a sales guy, and even in one case for Collier's Encyclopedia, you were selling door to door for 3 years when the average tenure you mentioned was 3 weeks because
3
people,
days.
3 days because people would just quit. Like
Commission only. You know, so.
Look, I once did phone sales. I quit in 3 hours. So, that must have just made hardcore your ability to sell. Like you're knocking on a door, someone answers who clearly doesn't want to talk to you, and you have to convince them to buy 17 books or 26
24,
books.
24 plus yearbooks for 10 years.
Right. So we'll get into the Paul Mitchell and the billionaire stuff, but like how do you build up the ability to sell, to be such a great salesman, to sell door to door like that? Like how do you sell? If I had to sell door to door right now, what should I do?
Okay, well, first thing you do is know this, and it's the rule to success in the world. Be prepared for a lot of rejection. If you're prepared for a lot of rejection, it's not going to affect you. An example, in my early 20s, I was 20 years old, I get out of the Navy, and I go to work for Collier's Encyclopedia. It's door-to-door sales commission only. Your training program, you get no money for. You have to memorize stuff for 4 days. But they told me, and I believe what they said. They said, first of all, did you have a set of encyclopedias? I said, no, because we're poor. We had nothing, They said, would it have helped? Oh, yeah, I wouldn't have to do homework at the library, at the school. They said, well, what we have is good. And the Colliers, anyone could read. It's a high school level, not college. And God, everyone should have one of these. They said, but we're going to tell you, very few people make it. The ones that make it big are the ones that know you're going to have a lot of doors closed in your face, but you must be just as enthusiastic on door 51 or 98 if 97 were closed in front of you.
What was your rejection rate?
Oh, at front, probably 99%, because it took me days to get into the first door. But I believed them. I said, okay, they said that's what it takes to make it. So it took a week before I got in the first door and made my first sale, and I was out of money, so I really needed that sale. But then as you got better at what you do, now maybe I had to knock on 20 doors where someone was there to get into one. At first, I'd have to do 20 presentations to sell one set of books. Then I got down to if I could give 3 presentations, I'll at least get 1 out of 3. So it's a matter of believing and knowing that you're going to get rejection. If you're prepared for it in anything you do, whether starting a business or your own personal life, if you know you get rejection, you're ready for it, you blow it off. And I'm going to get rejection, no big deal. I'm going to move on eventually.
How did you move from 99 doors slammed to 20 to, how did you kind of, was it something you said when they opened the door, or was it a confidence thing?
It was a combination of two. At first, I was very, very scared.
So they could read that on you.
Yeah, hi. They could read it, boy. And I wasn't persuasive at all. But as it went along, I realized I was having fun now. They're going to close the door in my face. What the heck? Hi, my name is JP, and I'm here with a new educational program coming in the air. I just like to take a few minutes and show you guys, get your opinion of it. What do you think? Or something like that. I want to make it easier and easier and easier, but still remain truthful.
Why did you say, and I know we're getting into the weeds with this, but why did you say a new educational program in the area as opposed to have Collier's Encyclopedia?
Only one guy ever asked me, "Are you selling something? And if so, what are you selling?" I said, "Encyclopedias." He goes, "You hit the right door. I love books. Come on in." Because people wouldn't let you through the door.
If they thought you were selling,
selling
as
if they
opposed
wouldn't
to
let you
like
through the
you
door.
telling them information.
Yeah, I'm here to sell you a set of encyclopedias. Would you like to see them? No, thank you. Goodbye. So you have to get them interested. So it's an educational program. It's unique. It'll only take a few minutes. And then in the matter of the first 10 minutes, I show them enough in a prospectus book to get their attention. If they're interested, then I will continue to go on. If not, politely thank them for their time and effort and move.
And then you also had this idea in your head that if you were a kid with these encyclopedias, your whole life would have been better. So you had that enthusiasm.
It would have helped. Oh yeah, I knew it would. I would have loved to have a set of books in my house. We didn't. We didn't have any money.
So
I believed it was good for everybody. So that's why I could tell a story with belief, because I believed it.
So you're saying, did you say the ratio was? I love this ratio, 20 to 3 to 1. Like, were 20 doors opened, 3 let you in, 1 sale?
Yeah, that was where I got down to.
Because, I've actually written that exact ratio before, and I find when selling companies, that's a good ratio. Like, if you make 20 calls to people who are probably interested, if you get 3 meetings, you'll get 1 offer.
Very good.
So it's a similar type of, like I worked for an M&A guy for a while, and it was a similar type of ratio. So...
but you also have the personality. You have the smile and the personality, so that helps out too.
Yeah, but maybe I didn't at first. Like, I don't know. You probably did all the time. I don't know. You have to develop
at first,
confidence.
I don't even know what I looked like at first. I was just afraid till I got used to doing it. Then it was fine.
So okay. Then you worked for these companies, and each one, it seems like you were doing better and better at sales. There was one point in the movie Good Fortune where I thought to myself, he's definitely getting fired. And that's when you were making more money than the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
You cannot make more money than the person who's paying you, or else they're going to fire you. That's rule number 1.
Yeah, exactly. But he was very foolish because I worked for only $3,000 a month salary, which was low. I left a higher paying job for that, and 6% of new sales. I tripled the size of his company. So I got that extra 6% of all the new sales, not existing sales. He just said, oh my God, now it's ongoing business, which means the next year I'd only get 6% off new sales. So each time I got that, I may have made more than him, but that following year, he's going to make more than me.
So he was, but that's the case. People are irrational in general, and you have to kind of use your rational behavior to work around the people who are irrational. 3
years after I started John Paul Mitchell Systems, that same particular gentleman called me on the phone and said, "I'd like to give you half my company free. Will you come and run it for me, do what you did for Paul Mitchell?" I said, "No. I mean, I'm doing this with Paul Mitchell now, but thank you anyways. I wish you good luck." And I think they're out of business.
Gary Goldman's been a guest on the podcast 4 times. I would say he's one of the all-time great comedians, and not many people would disagree with me. But what was interesting is the very first time he came on, I don't know if you remember, this was a couple hundred episodes ago, he was so quiet. I had to ask him in the middle of the podcast, "Are you okay?" And he admitted then, he was almost, I felt like he was red. I didn't know what was going on. And he admitted he was depressed. And then when he came on the next time, he said to me he was so depressed. He had been hospitalized. He was quitting comedy, moving back in to his mom's house. I felt really bad for him. And we went out for lunch the next day. We talked about it. And I really was a big fan of his comedy. I didn't want him to quit comedy, but he was quitting. And of course, I didn't want him to be depressed, but he didn't know what to do. He was scared. And I was scared for him. And then the last 2 times he came on, but particularly the last time, he is fully out of his depression. He talks about how he made it through it, and he transformed all this depression into a 1-hour comedy special on HBO produced by Judd Apatow. I just really think this guy is a special guy, and again, it's an example of taking tragedy and finding the humor in it and using that humor to lift you to greater heights. So here's Gary.
I don't know if this is a good analogy, but the best analogy I can use these days is that the depression, it's like a satanic possession. I wasn't myself for so long, and now to live as myself and be as myself is so, it's exhilarating, and I'm so grateful, and everything is so much easier to do. Walking up these stairs, getting on the subway, going to the grocery store, these things that used to be monumental tasks that I would put off because they were so overwhelming are now just I don't even think twice about that. So when over the years people would come to me and say, do you want to write a book? Do you want to write a screenplay? Do you want to pitch a show? I would say, I can't do laundry.
Is that almost sounds like
No, it's not. It's not. I couldn't even do laundry. So the idea of me writing a book, it's just, yes, I'm very flattered that you think I have that in me, but I may, but my tools are ruined. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because even so I must have asked you a couple of times in the past few months to come on the podcast, and finally our schedules clicked. But just in the past few weeks, you've been writing on Twitter these hashtag Goldman tips,
Yes.
like a comedy tip of the day. And often it's not just it's a tip for any kind of art. Like it could be a writing tip. I saw someone tweeted, all these are working for me for music.
Yes.
So they're really about art and the discipline and work and attention one should pay to being an artist of any kind. And I feel like these tips are picking up steam. So clearly there is a book in you that's coming out, bit by bit over Twitter, which is exciting to watch, because I've been following these tips. I realized maybe by day 4, this is going to be a regular thing, and they were fantastic. Now we're on day 22.
Yeah.
So and each one has been like a game changing tip.
Oh, wow.
So we're gonna talk about them in a little bit, but I wanted to ask you too about. I want to start with some of the things we ended with the last time, where you talked about depression and you were about to take a break then. But I do want to ask. Actually, I totally. Now I need to get slapped in the face to find out.
We were talking about depression.
Let's talk about depression. So when I last saw you, you were about to move back to Boston for a little while.
Yeah.
You were kind of medication resistant to clinical depression.
Yes.
And you had been for a while.
Yes.
I remember when you came on for the first podcast, it was early in the morning, and that was a bad time for you.
Yeah.
You could barely speak. You had no volume in the voice. And then the second time I had scheduled it in the afternoon, but still you were grappling with this demon.
Yes.
And it wasn't like a situational thing. It was like
a
medical thing.
Yeah, it was chemical, yes.
And you had been hospitalized?
Yes, and it's interesting because a depression has a rhythm, and it affects more than just your mood. It slows down your speech, your access to words, and also your confidence in speaking, and it's hard to make connections. My doctor said that a lot of psychiatrists refer to it as faux dementia, because you get a lot of the memory and cognitive issues that you get with dementia in adult patients. So it's alarming how many things that I experienced but completely forgotten. It'll really upset my girlfriend, because she'll say, "Oh, you don't remember that at all?" And I said, "No, it was in the depths of the depression, and I don't remember it." And she'll have such vivid memories of certain things, and it's sad.
Well, why do you think it's? I mean, and they say that also about bipolar. That bipolar often. The initial symptoms almost can seem like early onset Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And I wonder what's the connection between, like, some things are somehow not moving into long-term memory. Is that because the depression gets in the way? Like, is it anxiety or is it depression?
I'm not sure. It might be a combination. My psychiatrist would probably have more specific ideas. He's even for a psychiatrist, he's an expert on these things. He's got a great reputation. His name is Dr. Richard Friedman. He writes a lot of op-eds for the New York Times, so you can find a lot of his work. But I don't know what the connection is. I just know that it's the mood thing is only part of the depression, and there are physical things. Like I remember just my girlfriend would be walking, and she's a pretty slow walker, and I couldn't keep up with her. I would keep telling her to slow down and to wait for me, and it was so sad. It looked like she was my caregiver or something. I was just shuffling around in these small errands, like 3 blocks to go get my dog some food, would just exhaust me, and I'd come home and be exhausted from just 3 blocks and a case of dog food. So it's just the mood is terrible. That's the worst part of it. But there are the physical and the cognitive issues, and also there's no escape because you can't enjoy anything. Like I remember somebody saying, "Well, think of some of those things that you love to do and just do them exclusively." And the list was empty. There was nothing that I enjoyed doing. Watching movies, reading, which was my thing. I used to read 50 books at least every year, and for 2 years I didn't read a single book. I couldn't get through it. I couldn't concentrate. My mind would get so overwhelmed by the words, and I would just read things over and over again, and it just was too frustrating to keep doing.
And what do you think? I mean, there's lots of causes of depression. Like, there's lack of serotonin, there's lack of dopamine, there's bipolar, there's situational, which might get confused with clinical.
Sure.
What do you think was triggering yours? And this is why a lot of people appear to be treatment resistant, because they don't know what kind of depression they have.
Right. Yeah, I would say that it had to have been mostly chemical, because the thing that finally gave me the ladder to climb out was a change in medication. But it was the 7th or 8th change in medication within 2.5 years.
Yeah, I've heard it takes on average 8 years for someone to find the right treatment for depression.
It's incredible. And they're saying now that there's some sort of saliva test where they can sort of narrow the
Yeah, they can do a DNA.
Yeah.
They can do a DNA test and then match you against other people who were treatment resistant, but then eventually found the right medicine.
Right.
They match your DNA to see which one it most closely matches in their database, and then they give you the same treatment that the one who matches got.
Right. Yeah, I've heard about that, but I never did that. It was just trial and error. But my doctor said, I did ask him. I said, "Why did you think this would finally work?" And he said, the 2 medicines I take, one is Cymbalta, the other one is Remeron. He said they attack so many aspects of depression chemically, and he thought that this all-out assault would be the answer, and it was within 2 weeks, and it gave me enough of a jumping off point where I could start to do a few of the things that had helped me in the past to sort of augment my mood. And one of them was spending time with other people, and the other one was some exercise. Not very vigorous at first, but eventually I was able to run long distances, and that became something that was crucial in
because that releases endorphins.
Yes.
That in general is an antidepressant.
Yes, absolutely.
And so why didn't he start with that? Like, is there side effects? Like, what was he worried about if he started?
I'm not sure. We had tried a couple of other things, and then at the insistence of my mother, I got a second opinion, and it was just very, very foolish. And I tried something else, and it actually made everything worse by double or triple. So
yeah, like I think people, they just throw everything at you if they don't know what to do. Like I remember one time I was suffering from depression, and they just kept literally, let's say, upping the ante until I was taking these antipsychotic drugs that would just make me sleep all day.
Yes.
They weren't helping at all.
Yes.
They were just, I would just be groggy, or I would sleep 14 hours and then be groggy the rest of the day.
Yes. I will say, though, that I think Remeron is an antipsychotic, but in the dose that I take, it's been found to be an effective antidepressant, but I don't take very much. And I think it was more the Cymbalta that was the difference maker. Yeah.
And so what did you start after 2 weeks? What did you start feeling like? Did you start like the clouds cleared, or?
Well, I don't know if you ever have this reaction to coffee, but some days it makes me feel all powerful. and really confident, and I write things, and I'm just energized. And for 2 years, I would drink coffee, and nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. I wouldn't get anything out of it. And then I stopped drinking coffee. And then one day I had a cup of coffee, and I felt like a god. And I talked to my doctor about it, and he said that was a really good sign that this was having some effect on you. And that, and also I had exercised extensively during the 2 years. And I eventually gave up because it was too difficult, but I had exercised a lot and got nothing out of it. And then I started exercising again, and I would notice an improvement in my mood within 15 to 18 minutes of starting the exercise, and then it would carry over after the exercise, and it was really helpful. So it was the best way I can put it is the medicine just gave me a more normal starting place for my mood, rather than being just underwater all the time.
So I remember in 1996, I went to my very first boxing match in Madison Square Garden. It was my very first time going to a boxing event ever, and it was in Madison Square Garden. It was Riddick Bowe versus Andrew Galati, and a riot broke out, actually. People were blocking the door. Police were trying to get in. I could see police hitting people. People would run up to me like, hey, join in. And it was just crazy. But that's not the interesting thing for me about this boxing match. Every boxer, when they walk out, they have music that plays when they walk out. So Andrew Galati, who is from Poland, he had the Polish national anthem. But Riddick Bowe had this great, beautiful rap song that was to me, it was like a new evolution in rap. It was combining a lot more melody, a lot more singing. There was a beautiful woman's voice on it. There was a rapper. The beats were incredible. And there was also the word chess. And so I love chess. I'm like, what is this? The line was, I play my enemies like a game of chess. And I'm like, what is this song? This is incredible. And it was the Fugees. Wyclef Jean was the founder of the Fugees. Lauryn Hill, of course, was the woman's voice. So it was a bucket list moment for me, again, 23 years later, to have Wyclef Jean on my podcast. After the podcast, we had a little bit of a rap battle, actually, which he, of course, won. But this is another example of someone who overcame all odds. He was born in Haiti. He was as poor as it could possibly get. At age 9, he moved to the U.S. as a refugee. Hence, that's where the name The Fugees comes from, the rap group which he founded, The Fugees. He won 3 Grammys while at The Fugees. Now he's producing and creating every day. His life is a dream come true for him. He's also incredibly charitable around all issues related to Haiti and so on. I hope you like this clip as much as I do. Here's Wyclef Jean from episode 411. Again, I felt like I was bonding to him not only as a peak performer and someone who I had revered for so long, but I felt a friendship developing out of these podcasts. So many of these podcasts, I feel, some of them, it's a little harder to bond with the guest, and for a variety of reasons, but some of them, I feel like this instant kinship where even though I'm intimidated by them and in awe of them, perhaps for even childish reasons, we still manage to overcome that and become friends. And I'm always really grateful for that. A great example, by the way, is Jocko Willink. We almost make fun of the fact that we're complete opposites in almost every way, and yet we get along so well. And I've communicated with him outside of the podcast, and he's always been a great guest. He's been on several times. But let's first hear this Wyclef Jean clip. Let's talk about that. You were in Haiti for the first 9 years of life. Facts. You were in Brooklyn. You were basically, it's not like everybody who had your background said, oh, okay, I'm going to be in the worst ghettos possible, and then I'm going to simply be the biggest rap star on the planet. What's the leap? What made you different? So what do you think, if, let's say someone's listening to this and they're going to their job, their corporate job, they've been doing it for 30 years, they're getting tired, and they're like, it's easy for him to say, I get it, he grew up in bad neighborhoods and, poverty-stricken countries, but he had these benefits. He had this benefit that as a kid, he was able to put in his 10,000 hours studying music. I want to do something new now. What would you suggest to a guy like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had absolutely no advantage. My come up literally was like, it wasn't like I had the time and was like, oh, my mom was on welfare. Let me spend. No, I was a security guard. I was the waiter. I was the busboy that was serving you, right?
Do you think so?
I was
So
doing all of these jobs, but at the same time, I remember when they kicked me out of, they kicked me. I might as well say the restaurant that I got kicked out. I remember I got fired from Burger King, dog, right? And if
how?
anybody,
What did you do?
first of all, remember on the mass on the score, remember I said, I used to work at Burger King, a king
Yeah.
taking orders. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? So, yeah. So, what did I do? I literally was making Whoppers, but at the same time, he caught me singing. You know what I'm saying to you? And one thing about it is when you working in these fast food restaurants in our era, you would walk in and they would try to brainwash you with a video of what you're supposed to do and what not to do. And this video was like the Bible. So when it's like, welcome to Burger King. When you're making the Whopper, this is how you have to do. Your hands must be clean, boom, 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 boom. You must, and I wasn't like talking over no sandwich, you feel me? But literally, I'm making my Whopper, and in my mind, man, I'm like just in Madison Square Garden, and I'm just singing my songs. And the dude comes, he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing, Gene? And I'm like, I'm making a Whopper. He's like, no, you're singing over the Whopper. Is that what you're doing? I'm like, no, I'm not. Man, bang, fired. So I just want everyone that's listening. So it's not like we're those people. Like I was just saying, at the end of the day, every jobs that you could think, what was the word? I was like, yo, Clef can't keep a job. Because literally the job that I loved and was most passionate about was just doing my music. But when I tell you I've done the job that I remember most was working with my father. And this is why nobody in the world could tell me nothing about America. Nobody. Because I traveled the world. And when I tell you there's really no place like America, my man, like this ain't just a word. This like an immigrant who's telling you that. Because I'm working with my father and we cleaning bathrooms. I'll never forget at the Ramada Inn in New Jersey. Yes, Wyclef is cleaning bathrooms with his dad. And when I was cleaning bathrooms with my dad, the cover band was outside and they're playing Journey. But the coolest thing the cover band was playing was Owner of a Lonely Heart. And so when I used to clean the bathrooms, I would lose myself with the music that the cover bands were playing. And I remember I had the plunger and somebody did a mess in the bathroom, man. And I like put the plunger down, you know what I'm saying? And freaking piss come up on Wyclef's face. Man, dude, I'm so pissed off and so heated right now. I take the plunger and I throw it down, right? And my father comes to me and he's like, you pick up the plunger. Pick up the plunger now. And I pick up the plunger. He's like, this is America, you know. Never be shameful of anything you do as long as what? As long as it's honest. As long as it's what? Yeah, Dad, as long as it's honest. Okay, you go back, you finish the bathroom. And so for me, it's like, that's why I could relate to Bruce Springsteen. You know, that's why I could relate to Marley because so anyone who's listening to this ain't, that's why I say my life is like the Cinderella Man because at the end of the day, it's like I just want everybody to know the key to what I did is just the passion. And at the end of the day, it's like whether I'm cleaning the bathroom, whether I'm a waiter, wherever you see me, everyone gonna be like, yo, when I seen this dude, he just was so happy like it was his last day on earth. Because this is how my daddy raised me, but in my brain, I just had a ending plan. It's not where you start, but where you're going, you know?
And I think it's having that positive aspect that is always lets you move forward instead of saying, this is all I'm going to be. I have my excuses. I can't do it. Like if every day you're kind of saying, okay, well, I'm listening to yes, I'm cleaning the bathroom. I'm going to be positive about it, just like my dad said. That's always a way to just slightly move the needle a little forward. And if you keep doing that, maybe it'll be at a later age you could succeed where you succeeded, but it could still happen.
100%. I always tell people that first rule my dad taught me, you have to have a job. Like, you got to be doing something, like, at the end of the day. But passion is different. And my dad said, but once you lose your passion, though, you lose everything. So I always tell people, so my brother is a lawyer, but his passion is writing. So he loves to write scripts. And this is where he gets like his energies. And so I always meet people and they're like, yo, I'm working at AT&T, right? Or I'm an IT guy here. But then I also meet people that like, yo, I'm a doctor, but yo, I be DJing on the weekends. This is what I love. And somehow this is what they love. So I always tell us as humans, like, don't forget the true essence of life. Because sometimes it seems like you need that dollar. And because you need that dollar so much, you only work for that dollar. Then you turn around, you 6 feet deep and have not enjoyed the essence of life, which is adventure. And you have to have passion and find it.
The next clip I picked out is from episode 463 with Humble the Poet. This guy is like wise beyond his years. I don't want to say he's a failed rapper, but he didn't quite break out as a success as a rapper, but he did become really successful as a writer and so inspirational to read his story. I don't like self-help which tells you what to do. I don't like self-help where the self-help guy gets on a pedestal and says, here's the top 10 things you need to do to be a leader. Like, I find that to be a lot of BS. But with Humble the Poet, he tells his story, and this is how I like to write as well. I tell my story, speak honestly about the tragedy and the hardships that you've been through and how you dealt with them at that time, again, in an honest way. And again, let the readers decide what their takeaway is from it. And so I appreciate Humble the Poet as not only a writer, but as also someone who's very honest and sincere about his story. And I learned from his story. He was in fact, in his first book, Unlearn, he even commented that he was very much inspired by my book, Choose Yourself. And I see Unlearn as his own kind of extension of the ideas from Choose Yourself. So again, Humble the Poet, he's an artist, a writer, a rapper, started out as a school teacher. And in this episode, he told me about all the societal pressures he had on him, societal, cultural, family, all the pressures to become a doctor or a lawyer, and he chose his own path. So how did he break away from the shoulds and the can'ts and follow his own inner compass? That's what you'll hear in this clip. We're all disappointed in life, particularly the harder we work for something. It means it's worth working for. It means it's difficult. It means we're going to suck for a while because it's worth getting good at. Like, for instance, I just randomly opened to a chapter 20 here. You can be whatever the fuck you want. So it strikes me that maybe people were telling you, maybe while you're writing this, you're thinking, maybe people were telling you, you can't be a rapper, you can't be a musician, you need this, or you need to be in LA or New York or whatever. And so tell me what this chapter means.
I think, definitely when we think about, Biggie dedicating a song to the teachers that said he wouldn't amount to much, you always think about, and I always thought to myself, I was like, man, I know a lot of teachers. Teachers don't say that to kids. And I mean, nobody said to me, like, you're not good enough, you can't do it. What they do is they do a lot more passive aggressively. They'll be like, Can you make money doing that? Is that something, don't you think you should lean into something more realistic? What if you get like a full-time gig and just do that on the side? Like a lot of, slowly chipping away at your dreams and trying to say these types of things.
Or the worst is, really congratulate you because you're really brave that you're trying this.
Yeah, really brave that you're trying this. And what happened was when I got to that $80,000 of debt and realized that, shit, I don't have any way to pay this. I have a mortgage payment coming up. And I have no outs. I don't know what to do. It was the scariest situation of my life. And I isolated myself from everybody. I didn't talk to anybody. I avoided people because I not only owed the bank money, I owed friends money. I owed people money like that I cared about. I didn't want to be that guy who ran away. Somebody just ran away on me. Somebody that I considered a brother at this point. And I didn't want to be that guy, but I ended up spending 2 months I ended up spending 2 weeks in bed, just taking a bunch of whatever I could find and just medicating and avoiding the world. And that wasn't helping. And there were a lot of good friends in my life at that point that were saying good things to me. Like, you're going to have to sell this place. Like, you can't keep these payments up. You can't even afford to rent this out again because you need an income. And I would be like, see, you don't believe in me. You guys don't believe in me. Or like, hey, we saw in his behavior that he wasn't worth trusting, and you knew that, and you ignored that. And me being like, why are you blaming me for this? This isn't my fault, and really pushing back. And then until I eventually had some rest, had some time to grieve over this, and then finally had my adult moment where I was like, no one's going to save the day. I got to figure this out. And I am sick of hearing the stupid motivational quotes because Tumblr's not helping me today. And I'm going to be honest, I heard about this guy named James Altucher who got rich and then went broke and got rich again and then went broke and now lives a life of minimalism. And as I said, I read your story, then I read, your article on self-publishing. I read about your nomadic ways. I read about your minimalism ways before the word minimal was even cool. And I was like, this is the first guy who's just honest about it and who's not embarrassed. And that was one of the first steps, in me just telling people, like, I fucked up. I don't know what I did, but I don't know what to do, but I fucked up and I sold the place. I moved back home with my parents. I listened to a lot of I told you so's, and I ate it. I had to take these consequences. I focused on taking personal responsibility. Even if somebody betrayed me, even if somebody lied to me, I didn't see any value anymore in feeling like a victim. I think for a long time, I enjoyed the pity that I got. I enjoyed people feeling sorry for me. But now I got to a point where people's pity isn't going to pay the bills. People's empathy isn't going to help me move further right now. I need to take all the responsibility I can.
It's interesting because you look at stories of successful people or, people who are striving for success. No one ever says, man, what really made me a success was being a victim.
Yeah.
I really took that victim thing and just took it to the top.
Yeah, I ran with it. Everyone felt sorry for me and they just hit me with bags of money.
Yeah, like no one, victimhood is never a strategy.
Yeah.
So
it's addictive, but it's not.
Right, it's addictive because it's a way to relieve stress. Like you're feeling the stress like, am I a failure? Because that's really stressful. Oh no, I'm just a victim. So that relieves the stress.
Like I was a good guy. They all lied to me. Right. I didn't do anything wrong here. Until I had my adult moments, which was like, yes, you did. You listened to a person's words and you ignored their actions.
So what does this chapter mean? You can be whatever the fuck you want.
So this is the point where I started coming up with ideas and having these little internal voices in my head trying to talk me out of it. You come up, and this is everybody. You say, I'm going to go to the gym. And then 2 minutes later, your mind's like, should we eat breakfast first? Maybe we need to buy new shoes before we actually go. Is our gym membership even, renewed? And we say all this shit and then we talk ourselves out of it. And the reality is, be mindful of those voices talking yourself out of it. And you can legitimately be whatever the fuck you want to be. If you want to be a rapper, then go ahead and be a rapper. If you want to be an aerospace engineer, you can be that. You can be whoever you want to be. And your biggest obstacle is yourself and the voices that you've carried along. Whether it was somebody that said something to you when you were a child and that stuck with you and you didn't understand it when you heard it as a child and now you've just carried it into adulthood. It's about learning about yourself. And that's why the book's called Unlearn, is because it's about letting go of old, stale ideas that we've just been carrying around as baggage.
And again, those ideas, I'm fixated on this, but those ideas had good intentions. Your parents wanted you to be comfortable. They wanted you to be safe.
Yes.
Okay, the best way for you to be safe, don't try to be a trapeze artist.
Yeah.
Like, you want to be a trapeze artist? How about you just play soccer at school and then study hard and be a lawyer?
Yeah, because my parents came to this country in the 70s and what they understood made money were doctors, lawyers, and engineers. Mm-hmm. And we always make the joke that that's one job now, doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Right.
And I feel like any child of an immigrant from anywhere around the world has had this experience where, but they have the best intentions. They're not sitting there like, how do we crush our child's spirits today? They're saying, how do we maintain our bloodline and thrive in this new country that we barely understand?
I think it's an important thing to understand to also avoid the victim thing. Like, if you understand that even if you don't know why somebody planted some education in you that might be stale, they probably had good intention doing it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to understand why. You could just say, look, they had good intentions, but now I need to have an adult moment and do what I want to do. And to your point of like anyone could be a rapper, not everyone's going to be, Eminem, but anyone could play some music, write some poetry, good or bad, and rap to it.
Yeah.
And then you could do it again the next time, and you're probably a tiny bit better than the first time, and so on.
And if you have fun making it, then you win. If the reward comes through the work, and you're just enjoying the rainbow, and you're not even thinking about a pot of gold, then you've already won. That's what 90% of the people haven't even realized yet.
One of my favorite people on the planet. I could talk to this guy 8 hours a day, every day, about writing, about art, about life, about history, about writer's block, about what he calls the resistance. We all face the resistance when it comes to achieving, whatever our passions are, whether it's, writing a novel, making a TV show, starting a business, being a good parent. We all face the resistance. And he's written so many great books, from The War of Art, Turning Pro, and many, many more. He's written so much about this. He started out as a cab driver for 20 or 30 years, but he always knew he was a writer. He wanted to be a writer. And now he's an amazing best-selling author. You might have seen one of the movies based on his books, The Legend of Bagger Vance, one of my favorite movies. And it's amazing how he describes the arc of the hero and how he applied that to not only The Legend of Bagger Vance and his other novels, but also how the arc of the hero applies to you as the artist. And so Stephen is always a welcome guest on this podcast. He's been on a couple of times. Let's play the clip. I want to talk about, you have this beautiful way of describing what is a good book and what is good writing and what is the artist's journey. And I want to talk about those, but I want to talk about it not only in the context of, for listeners who want to create a work of art, but also where are we in our own stories? Are we the heroes, or are we the red shirts? Meaning, on Star Trek, whoever wears the red shirt when they beam down to the planet, those guys are dead by the end of the story.
Right?
Yeah. So are you Captain Kirk, or are you one of the guys who beams down with everybody and you're just dead by the end? So because I think you kind of imply in these things that everybody is a hero of their own story. I don't think that's true. I think some people get the call to action and never respond to it. They have the opportunity to be the hero, but they don't respond.
I'm sure that's true. But they should respond, and sooner or later everybody does, I think.
I don't know because look at your own story. You were a cab driver here. You were trying to be a writer unsuccessfully. I think you mentioned you worked for 28 years writing before you published your first novel.
Something like that.
Now 20 books later.
Yeah.
However you define success, I could define it for you and say you're a success, because that's a thing you talk about, which is what is success, and we could talk about that later. But what if you had never really gave up? I mean, in order to be the hero, you have to give up things. There's you talk a little bit in one of the little books about physics and how often energy we put in one area, like let's say self-doubt, comes back to us in another area, which is self-belief. And as you conquer that self-doubt, you get self-belief. But what if you had never given and sacrificed the things you did? You might not have been the hero of your story.
Well, I guess that's true, James, in the sense that, like we're talking about the hero's journey, right? That starts with the hero, quote unquote, in the ordinary world, whatever that means, stuck in their job, stuck in their whatever it is. And then comes, according to Joseph Campbell, the call to adventure, right? Some sort of summons, or your life breaks down, or whatever it is. And immediately after that, in the myth, is the refusal of the call, right? Like Luke Skywalker, when he first gets called to go with Obi-Wan Kenobi, says, I don't want to do it, or Odysseus, when he's summoned to the Trojan War, he does that whole thing where he pretends to be crazy and sows the field with salt. And
Peter Parker, when he uses his Spider-Man abilities to just perform in a boxing ring until his mentor, his
believe
Uncle
it or
Ben.
not, I've never seen Spider-Man, but if you say that, well, that's exactly true.
Forget the movies, just the comic books. Uncle Ben died and said, with great power comes great responsibility, and finally he says, "I'm going to be a superhero instead."
So then the hero's journey doesn't really start, as you say, until somebody does respond to the call. So if they don't respond to it, then you're right. They're not the hero of their own lives anymore.
Right, because you.
But I don't think it's ever too late to respond to that call.
Right. Well, that's a good point too, and I don't think there's more. As you point out with the artist journey, there's more than one journey you can have in life.
Many journeys.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to get into that, but I love the phrase that after the call to action, the hero is going from the ordinary world to the extraordinary world. So you talk about in these books the inciting moment, but you just said a phrase earlier which I think is almost equal to the inciting moment. I'm curious about it, and it struck me 3 times. So when you describe Jason Bourne's inciting moment, it's when he says, "Who am I?" And you just said, "Who am I?" And I wonder if that's always the inciting moment when they realize, "Oh, I'm right I'm right in the middle line, that thin, tiny middle line between the ordinary world and the extraordinary world. Which one am I? Am I ordinary or am I extraordinary?" And you have to ask this question, who am I at that point?
I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And it's like sort of what I was just saying before about how things will boil up inside you and spontaneously make you cross that threshold. Because I think that question from birth is the thing that plagues all of us, right? Who am I? Why am I here? And we're as we grow up, we're presented with various identities, right? We can be a jock, we can be a nerd, we can be, whatever, right? And as we try these on, none of them work, right? And we find ourselves in some sort of an ordinary world. We get married, we have we have a house or an apartment or whatever it is. But that question, you're absolutely right, I think, James, is who am I? Who am I? And if we're living a life that's not kind of true to who we really are, if we're really a stand-up comic or a writer and we're working on Wall Street or we're doing something like that, that thing is kind of applying pressure internally on us. We may feel it in dreams or whatever, or we'll act it out in real life. But I think you're right. When the hero crosses the threshold and goes into the extraordinary world, whether he realizes it or not, or she realizes it or not, the real question they're asking is who am I? And they may be at the start, they have an idea that I'm going to be X as I enter this extraordinary world, and that might not turn out to be true. By the end, as the layers of the onion get peeled back through experience, they sort of come at the end to realize, this is who I am. But I think if somebody's listening to this and they're sort of a little bit lost in their life, or they're wondering, how do I get to that moment, or is there that moment in my life? I think the answer is yes, because it's built in to your soul from birth. Just like an acorn has got the oak tree in it already, I think each one of us is born with a destiny and with a calling and with an individual identity that I'm a believer in previous lives, but even if you don't believe in that, I think you have to agree that we're born as like 3 or 4 kids are born in a family. They're all completely different from day one, right? They're not a blank slate. So in other words, I think what I'm trying to say is that inside of us, kind of like a woman's biological clock, something is ticking. Our hero's journey is sort of ticking, and it wants to be lived out. And even if we are avoiding it through fear or whatever it is, or we're living an ultra-conventional life or doing what other people expect us or doing what we think we ought to be, that little time bomb is kind of ticking. And at some point, or it's maybe another analogy would be a pot or a kettle that's starting to boil, it's going to sort of come to the surface and kind of force itself, erupt itself into consciousness. So that I think in many ways, our lives are sort of living us, if you know what I mean. Our deeper life is living us. And I mean, I don't know what brought you to that moment of giving stuff away or other moments in your life, but I'm sure it was some undercurrent that you might not even have been aware of.
No, I agree with that, and I do think it probably does boil up for people. I mean, that's the phrase midlife crisis is kind of that
Uh-huh.
boiling point. But let me ask you, like, did your parents uh, reach that? Did your father, for instance, have a call to action when that took him from the ordinary to the extraordinary?
You know, that's a really good question. I wish my dad was here to ask him that. I have a feeling off the top of my head as you ask me that. My dad lived I don't want to say a conventional life. He fought in World War II. He, raised a family in the New York suburbs. And I think my dad was once they had my brother and me, he kind of gave himself over to raising us. So I don't know if if the call really kind of came for him in that sense. And in a way, it's kind of heroic what he did, but it was a sort of a sacrifice.
But I think that's the thing, is that not everybody ultimately becomes the hero of their story. And I'm not saying your dad wasn't the hero of the story. Like you say, it's heroic
I
raising
think
kids.
you're right. I think you're right.
But like take what the so-called greatest generation, which your dad was a part of. He
Yeah.
fought in World War II.
Yeah.
But then the 50s happened, where there was this sort of, after the war, we had enough. That generation had had enough. They got tired. They wanted the benefits of fighting in that war, which was what they thought was the conventional life.
Yeah.
Let's even put up the wall
Yeah,
around
yeah.
our house
Yeah.
to keep out the
Yeah.
unconventional.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, and that's why they were so threatened later on by, the late 60s and all the youth movements then and so on.
I mean, you could make a case, it's just coming to me as you're saying this, that, I'm a member of the boomer generation, and you could make a case that our generation, this boomer generation, acted out the hero's journey of their parents, in some way, carried that on. I mean, why did that entire generation just sort of freak out in kind of a mass, real social movement that dominated the country for years?
Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, because, World War II for many young people was kind of this extended transition from youth to maturity. And whereas the boomer generation, many people who didn't go to Vietnam, for instance, didn't have that extended break, didn't have that intensity of fighting in a war.
Yeah, yeah.
And so instead of just moving into the 1950s style of conventionalism, you were 18, 19, 20, you're like, I'm not doing that, because they were 27 when they did it or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
They were done with World War II and then the GI
Yeah.
Bill, so they were much older.
Yeah.
And then, but at 18 or 19, you can't have the white picket fence, so you have youth movements
Yeah.
and this that
Yeah.
changed the world.
And flipped it to the other side, if you think about the greatest generation, there were guys that were like 20 years old and 21 years old flying bombers over Germany. So they were like propelled into maturity, into incredible maturity, responsible for the lives of so many other people, not to mention destroying other people's lives, that maybe that was an incredible crisis too. They were just forced, they were kind of forced onto a hero's journey before they were even remotely ready for that kind of thing.
The next clip is, I've mentioned her earlier, Julia Cameron, author of The Artist's Way. Again, she writes so succinctly about creativity, and we're all hampered by our own beliefs and insecurities. And the book The Artist's Way is like a Bible of creativity. But this podcast was so important to me because I'm always experimenting with new things, new ways of being creative, new ways of experiencing life, new activities. Like lately I've been doing, as many of you know, I've been performing stand-up comedy up to 10 times a week in some weeks. But I always think to myself, you know what? I'm never going to be able to put in the so-called 10,000 hours. I'm already 51 years old. What is this going to even mean? Like 10,000 hours from now, I'll be 60. What am I going to do? Be going on stages at midnight on a Tuesday night when I'm 60 years old? No. I'm just doing it because it's a really difficult skill, and I love it. And I love learning the creativity behind it, and it's adding to my writing, it's adding to my public speaking, it even adds to my sales ability and the way I look at the world. And so I said to Julia Cameron, I feel like I'm never going to be great at this, or I'm never even going to be good at this because I'm not going to be able to put in the hours. I got other responsibilities. I'm very busy. And she said, what a shame that you are putting yourself in this emotional bondage by the 10,000 hour rule. And she gave me very practical suggestions about how to think about this and what to do to overcome my own feeling of I can't and get to the other side of that to find my own version of whatever success is in this area. And I plan on I have been applying her techniques every single day since. So this episode is number 484. Here's the clip.
When I teach, I use lots of lists. I'll say, list 25 things that you love. I love rhubarb pie. I love green chili stew. I love Arabian horses. I love maple leaves. And when you list the things that you love, it's a very centering exercise. And I think it's important that we maybe jot down 25 things we love. And then when we are feeling at our most despairing, we look at our 25 things we loved and we think, wait a minute, I am the one who loves this.
What other types of lists are your favorite lists?
One called Counting Coup, which is from a Native American tradition. And that's, I'm proud that I taught my daughter how to ride horseback. I'm proud that I roller skated in Central Park. I'm proud that and you you list a list of 10 things you're proud of, and it gives you a sort of snapshot of your value system.
Yeah, it's interesting. People tend to, whatever you put most of your attention on is a good way of describing who you are. So you look at like the internet now, if all you do is argue with people on the internet, then basically that's the type of person you are. If you, focus on the things you love, then the type of person you are is a loving person. And I think that stuff is more valuable than people think, and does require to set aside some time to make those lists, or to do the morning pages, or to connect to that part of yourself, or to bring out your authentic voice. And maybe it's that, just to bring it back to my emotional terrorist, maybe it's that authenticity that often can skip the 10,000 hours, particularly on something creative.
Well, I'd love to see you skip 10,000 hours.
Me too. I've done like maybe 3,000 hours. I want to skip 7,000 now.
So I think writing a list of these are the things that I love, writing another list, which I think is valuable, which is I love to dance. I love to hike. I love to, and you list activities that you love, and then you go back to the top of your list and you write the date of the last time you let yourself do it.
That's great.
And a lot of times you'll find you absolutely love making homemade vegetable soup and you haven't made it in 10 years.
Yeah, because life goes by. When you're going, let's say the average person, or let's say the average American worker has their 9-to-5 job. That means from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. they're either getting ready, commuting, or going to work, and they might feel stuck in that routine, trying to figure out how to get out of that routine. What would you suggest to that person who's just feels stuck in general? They can't quit their job, or they feel like they can't because of kids, mortgage, whatever. What stirs the pot?
I would tell them to go to a children's bookstore. And what they will find is that there are books like All About Snakes, all about engines, all about big cats. And that if they let the childlike part of themselves pick a book, a lot of times, this is where I just, this 10,000 hours thing really throws me, because I think that it's intimidating. And you start counting and trying to say, well, did I ever have 1,000 hours? And I think I want to read another poem.
Absolutely.
And this one addresses the working drudge that is afraid to find something delightful. And the children's bookstore is a good source of delight. So are pet stores. Okay, this is called Come to Me. Come to me. There is no darkness in which I cannot see you. Come to me. My green heart holds your ancestors. They are waiting to hear your dreams. Speak to them. They know your name. Do not imagine you are alone. Do not imagine they have left you. They are listening, waiting for your voice. Come home. All of us are waiting. Every bird remembers you. The lion in his pride still knows your name. The gazelle, the snake, the silver heron lifting at the shore. All these and more, your family. Come back to me. You do not need to grind your bones to dust, rusting your heart. You are known to us. Only come home.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.